Well, we are live. We're a little late. Poor Becky's having some technical difficulties.
I am. So when I end up and I freeze middle of this, you'll all know why, but I think it has to do with our storms. So
You're getting storms.
yeah, the weather's moving in, and of course, when I have satellite internet, it doesn't necessarily work all the time. So I may be a little frozen tonight.
Right. Well, I don't know if anybody missed us last week, but we took the week off for the Memorial Day. Um, and hopefully you came back and watched some of our earlier episodes. So we decided I actually flew to visit my parents um, a week ago Saturday, and I go back home to Texas in this coming Saturday night. So I'm still in Indiana. That's why you see something. I'm not in the camper right now.
You flew the camper.
I flew the coop. Yep, right. Uh-oh. Lisa said we are echoing like crazy. I hear you just fine. Is it me, Lisa, or is it Becky?
I don't know. It could be on my part because, like I said, it's still freezing off and on. So
Yeah.
I'll try to mute and let you go.
Well, I'll just dive right into it. So we decided to have a roundtable chat. And we've actually had Coach Sly on the podcast, but Sly is actually a coach in the BNC community. So I'm just going to bring her on. We're just going to start chatting and have a good time. So, um, welcome, Sly, Coach Sly.
Thanks. My cat is being naughty in the
Hello.
background. So if you hear things crashing, it's fine.
We're having a night, aren't we?
Yeah.
That's why we go live because it's fun.
He's decided he wants to knock everything off the tables right now.
Of course. Of course. Isn't that funny? So, Sly, just to bring everybody kind of up to speed on who you are, tell us who you are.
Do you got an hour? No, just kidding.
Yeah.
My name is Sly. I'm an addict. That's usually how these conversations starts. I've been in recovery for over 10 years, and a good 5 years of that working on the mental health and the correlation to the nutrition and mental health and addiction. I By day, I help run a photography lab as a manager there, and by night, I help coach and hold a meeting on the BNC for mental health and nutrition. I've also been able to start doing treatment groups in drug and alcohol treatment places on food and nutrition this last year, and hopefully by midsummer or by summer, we'll have our 12-step keto program out. So,
Yay. So, Coach Sly, tell them what you do for the BNC community.
besides getting to hang out with you ladies all the time and chit and chat, on Tuesdays at 7 p.m., we have a mental health and addictions meeting. And we just kind of see where the night takes us. And we used to have more formal education, but we kind of see where the time goes with it now and see what's on everybody's mind. Sometimes we read from the moonlight meditation, and sometimes we just answer questions, and sometimes we get a little naughty.
We have fun.
We
We
do.
have fun. We learn a lot from you. I remember the first meeting I attended, your meeting, and because I remember thinking, not, I'm not addicted. Like, I don't have an addiction. Like, I'm thinking, alcohol, drugs, that kind of thing. And then, like, right out of the gate, it's like, I learned that, yes, I am. I am an addict, and it's on food.
You know, another platform that I was on before the BNC, I got a lot of that. They would come to it and I'd pull out some of the like, are you an addict? It was actually NA literature that I base it off of, and I'd start asking the questions, right? And people are like, oh wait a minute. And it doesn't just have to be the food. I mean, many people have many outlets, right? And it doesn't. I was just fortunate enough that I had those addictions that straight out said, hey, you're an addict. um, and then along the way I learned that it doesn't have to be drugs or alcohol that our addiction can take hold of. So it was it's been a learning curve for sure. It's amazing how the mind works and the different ways it can do. I remember even with the food, I was getting rid of sugars, right? So I was, and the white stuff. They tell you to get rid of the white stuff first. And I was doing that. And all of a sudden, I had a craving for French fries. And I had never really been a French fry person.
Hmm.
Yeah, it was the weirdest thing. But I just wanted French fries, and the gentleman that was helping me at the time, he's like, "That's your addiction, trying to get the sugar." And I
Wow.
was like, but it was sneaky, right? It was a sneaky way because it doesn't, you don't think of like French fries as sugar, but it's still a carbohydrate, which turns into sugar, right? So it's just like that, just like captured my attention also on just like how the mind can trick you of, you know, where the addiction is and how it can be set in.
Yeah, that was wild. Yeah, I do. I'll never forget it because it was like, and then you start thinking about all the ways you can be addicted, right? Chaos. Chaos is in it.
Absolutely. That's one of the things that so I've actually just been discussing that key point with somebody these last 24 hours because you know um, our life starts to get so good. We start to get normalized. We have a routine. We're graduating from college. We're succeeding in whatever our avenues are, and then you see this character defect or this other thing coming in and you're like you don't understand why. Well, it's because you don't have enough chaos in your life. You're so normal to be in chaos, and it starts drifting away and you're like, I need that in my life. I'm no different than that though. I just like to get my chaos from trash TV these days. That's my substitute for the chaos.
Well, it's
That's
all a way to get the dopamine hit.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Getting that dopamine hit any way you can, I guess sometimes. That's why I think why when people um, start working. So one of the things that I do when we start working on addictions with food is always ask like, do you have any other outlets? Have you ever had any other issues? It's very, very important because sometimes you can start playing whack-a-mole, right? With them. And I remember I had one client who I was working on with the food, and she was doing great, right? She was doing great. We had a plan. She was going to Las Vegas for her son's whatever thing he was doing, right? And she did really good with the food, and everything seemed to go well. And then about a week and a half after she got back, I got a phone call, and she told me she had lost like $10,000 in gambling after she got back home. She had never told me that she had a gambling problem prior to then, right? And so, wasn't even thinking of like the cues and the triggers that could have been going on while she was there, things that we could have been working on, or at least looking at, because when you're aware of them and what can happen, it's a lot easier. I know Ben has taught us that even if you make it through a situation, let's say we're brand new and we're just giving up sugar, and we get invited to a birthday party or some sort of celebration where all the drug foods are available, and we make it through that event. Well, some people get so excited that they make it through that event that they don't think about the next few days, and how that those cues and triggers could be just like sitting in the back of the head as a time bomb. And then 3 days later, somebody could end up with their face down and planted in sugar of some sort. And those are kind of important to be able to be aware of and look at.
That's wild.
It
And
is.
we don't think of that side of right of food. And unfortunately we need food. Right? I mean, I have to if I want to live, I need food. But you don't realize all the bad habits that you've acquired, for me, decades and decades worth, right? And
I can remember as a little kid using food to soothe myself.
really,
Oh, for sure. I can remember smashing up bread to eat it, you know. I can remember all the, wanting to go to my cousin's house because her mom kept all like the school pizzas and the treats and everything there, and I had, to be able to do that, and we would sneak down at night and grab some or make some in the middle of the night. And then, it evolves, right? Sometimes people just stay with food, and I I keep saying fortunately, and then some people may not think it's fortune, but I wouldn't be where I am today if I didn't go through what I went through, right? So there's that important part of it. Um, but the drugs and alcohol, I think alcohol is harder to stop than street drugs. Um, and I think food is just as hard, because basically, if I don't want to do meth, or if I don't want to do heroin, or if I don't want to do fentanyl, um, if I don't go to the drug dealer's house, or I don't go to the house that everybody's doing those drugs, I got a pretty good chance of not using that day, right? That's a good chance I'm not going to use that day. But with food and alcohol, and other things, the drug dealers are everywhere and everybody's using. There's been, especially I had found a new respect for alcohol, for people that have alcohol as an outlet, when I got clean. I'm like, I've watched people, like it could be as simple as running to, especially if you around here, if you're homeless, it could be as simple as like running to somebody on the street. And I've seen it happen. I watched a girl was doing so good, and she went to go for an interview, and she went in, but she was early, so they asked her to come back. And there was somebody that she knew was sitting outside with a bottle. She never made it back into that interview. That's just how addiction works sometimes.
Well,
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, and I think you're right. That is the biggest thing, is because every time we turn around, right, just fuel up your vehicle. gas stations now have food. You go to check out at a grocery store and there's so much, food at the checkouts that is nothing but sugar, right? It's just junk. It's empty calories. And that's where people really have to kind of go back on the mental health side of things and really figure out what that true hunger is and what is emotional eating. And I know you have a great acronym, and I use several in my coaching, but how do you ladies distinguish between true hunger and emotional? And what do you tell your clients with it?
Well, I use HALT. That's my favorite, that I use that one. But here's the other thing with it is like, I can still struggle with emotional eating. Now, what that looks like is different these days. It can be bacon and cream cheese or a ribeye rather than trying to stuff, zebra cakes down my mouth and a thing of chocolate milk. But I think after you know what emotions are and you can feel them again, and we're not numbing ourselves out with food and sugar and stuff like that, and you know what emotions are, you can figure out whether you're hungry or whether you're emotionally eating, because there's going to be a trigger. Mine's stress and lack of sleep. Those are still probably my two biggest ones today. I just don't get hung up. I try not to get hung up on the fact that I am emotionally eating, because I went from eating the zebra cakes to eating a ribeye. And I think it's like, maybe when I do that, that's my body telling me that I needed that nutrition and that fat and that protein. Didn't you tell me that, Becky?
Yeah, the body is typically seeking something, and that's just like when you're eating the potato chips or whatever your food of choice is for, junk food, right? It's not necessarily that food that you're craving. There's something within that food that you are actually craving. I mean, because if you sit down with a bag of potato chips, you're going to taste like the first, maybe 5 to 10 chips, and after that it's just mindless eating. Your body is seeking something, it's seeking the nutrients, but it's not getting it from that bag of chips. And most of the times when people end up are doing that form of a craving, if they end up and they have even just a little bit of fat, it'll calm that part of the body, the cortisol side essentially, to where they won't have that, how do I say it, that fulfillment, right, of going on a complete binge. It'll kind of halt that hunger, it'll calm that cortisol, and they'll be able to, be back more in the present state of mind.
And that's been a transformation for me. It wasn't like I started doing this and that's what I ended up doing. It was like a process. I think I went through uh the carnivore waffles was, I probably should have gained 300 pounds eating those, but I didn't. I wasn't counting them right. But I think also over the years, using nutrition as my base for my mental health, I've healed my brain enough too, to where, I don't, my first response to stress isn't, to go use, you know, um, street drugs or alcohol, um, or even at this point, even using, cake or ice cream. I'm not using those to numb out. I may use a ribeye to calm down or to pull it, together. I was a few weeks ago when I was fasting and I was under a lot of stress, and I was spiraling, and I was trying to be a good student too, and I had to break my fast and I ate, but I was able to eat and be calm and not keep spiraling after I ate. And I think I ate bacon, right? Yeah, I
Mm-hmm,
had
mm-hmm.
bacon. So it just shows that, like, maybe sometimes the emotional eating, depending what we're emotionally eating, can be a good tool and not a punishment or not a bad thing. And I think that was the first time I ever had that perspective for that. Because it was like you you hear a lot of like emotional eating's bad. You know, you shouldn't emotionally eat.
Yeah. Sherry, how do you end up and distinguish between true hunger and emotional eating in your life?
Oh, it's been a huge learning process, right? Because um, in when I got started on my healing journey, I was definitely an emotional eater, and I would do a lot of binging at nighttime. Like my husband would go to bed, and then I'm binging. Like it was crazy. Um, and then when I started down my, well, it was keto. It was dirty keto, but it was keto when I first got started. And I cleaned, when I tell you I cleaned the cupboards and the refrigerator, like the pantry, everything, and the amount of junk I threw out. And then on my next night to binge, I didn't have any. And I realized had become a habit and I wasn't really hungry. And so it's been a learning process through all of that. Um, and there's times throughout, my healing journey that, um, you go out to eat and I have a ribeye in front of me and I'm eating and eating and eating. And I would eat it all instead of taking it home, the rest of it, because I was full. And I know, right? I know how much this amount, right, is. And again, that was a learning process that it was okay to bring food home if I went out to eat and eat it the next day or the next meal or whatever. So it's definitely been, and there's still times. Well, it's funny you say that because as I was talking, so I'm in Indiana and I lived in this Fort Wayne where we're at right now, where my parents are. I lived here as an adult. I had my daughter here, and I went to the first when I landed a week ago Saturday. I had to go to the grocery store to get food, and it was funny because it was like, oh, I could go down the frozen food aisle and get Indiana's known for its sugar cream pie, and it's Wix that makes it. I shouldn't even be like some of the best I've ever had. Well, this grocery store has it in the frozen food section, and I immediately thought of that. Now I don't think of that any other time. Now, why did I think of it then in the grocery store? Right? Yeah, isn't that nuts? And I was with my daughter. My daughter flown in for the weekend too. And it was funny because she was putting stuff in my shopping cart. And I'm like, I'm looking at it and I go, are you going to eat that? And she goes, well, if I don't, you will. And I went, no, I'm not. And she would be like, and pull it out of my cart. But it was funny how, why did I think of pie? Like sugar cream pie. And it was like from being in that grocery store in that old, that's decades and decades old habit there. Right?
Cues and triggers,
Yeah.
emotional ties.
Yep.
Well, and that's just what I was going to say, the emotional tie. And, a lot of times when you were talking about eating a steak, many of us grew up in the clean plate club, right? You're not leaving the
Mm,
table until your plate's clean. And so that just ingrained it in us that I know, me too. And it didn't matter what was on my plate. It had to be clean.
Mhm.
And so it was that whole process of, feeling like we needed to eat, even if we were full. We had that instance tonight at supper. We were eating, and my daughter had part of hers, and she's like, I really, how did she phrase it? Something in regards of, I was hungrier than, or I wasn't as hungry as I thought I was. And of course, she's like, well, I've already, prepared it. And I'm like, it's okay. It's okay. If you're full, throw it away.
Do you know though that's one of the biggest struggles that we have with some of my people, especially um sometimes it doesn't even happen because a clean plate club. It can happen because they didn't have enough food when they were younger and they had to save it, or they have kids now that they're trying to clean up behind because the kids are wasting food, and to waste that food is so hard for them to let it go, that it'll be okay. um but it's the same concept, and that's can be hard to let go.
And that's where, it was easier because I do get what you're saying, right? When anyone that has ever, lived paycheck to paycheck or even lived on subsidies, um, that's tough because you're trying to end up and stretch it. Where now, at least, I don't look at it, or I used to not look at it as wasting or trash, right? We would always scoop it into a bowl and I'd feed my chickens the scraps. So, it was like repurposing. I never had to buy, chicken food because they always had enough food for anyone that knows what I do during the day. The chickens had enough food. Um, but yeah, it's just those type of things that are so ingrained in us that we struggle even as adults, and breaking that habit before it gets passed to the next generations.
Yeah, my daughter called me on the carpet here recently, like, "You made me eat all my food on my plate, Mom." And I'm like, "Yeah, I know, I did." But that's what I was taught. Like, but there for a while, I was a single mom. So it was hard to, I remember making taco salad, like a giant bowl of taco salad that we ate off of for like days. And we didn't let it go to waste. She doesn't know, right, that it was such a financial struggle as a single mom, to feed her. But yeah, she called me on the carpet on that. And I'm like, yeah, I know, I did it.
Well, even when I was in the army, they have you like eat, you're supposed to eat everything, and you're supposed to do it in such a short amount of time that you have it allotted. That had been a struggle for me for a long time too, because when you came out, you're like, you know, your plate's going to be gone before anybody else's plate's going to be gone. Those habits, I, even I still cannot. When I watch people drink room temperature water, it it hurts my soul. I know it's supposed to be better for you, but it's just that thing that happened. Like when I was in the army, I was supposed to drink a canteen of water every hour in the heat in June in Missouri, and like now I can't even fathom drinking anything that's room temperature or warmer of just like plain water.
I think this is where a lot of coaches miss out on the mental side of when they're coaching someone on a healing journey. I think this is like a big thing that it's like, a lot of influencers and things like that I watch. And it's like the mental health side of it, just, they don't talk about it.
Well, they should, 'cause it's very important, especially with most of your clients that have addiction. I don't like dual diagnosed because it's all a mental health thing, you know. Addiction is a mental health thing. You may have more than one mental health, you know, thing that you have to work on, but if you don't know, you could kind of cause harm.
Mhm.
Um, if you don't have experience with it either. Um, I know that it was very important to me, even with all the self-taught knowledge that I had, right? And what I had done for myself, and you know, the things that Becky had taught me and I knew that worked, it was still hard for me to put that in practice with other people, um, because for the mental health piece, because you know, you don't want to fuck somebody up or make it worse. And mental health medications can be scary, and some people aren't really forthcoming to what mental health issues they might have. um, what I have learned though, and while I'm practicing this, is again, I don't coach for weight loss. I don't do it. I will use an addiction model of coaching for mental health and addiction. Weight loss is a side effect most of the time for it, and that's how I go about it. But um, even I had one client, a recent client actually. She did not want to tell me what her mental health diagnosis was for a good bit. It wasn't till way later, and we had developed that rapport. We had developed that relationship where she felt comfortable enough to tell me what it is and not feel judged. And at first, I was like, "Is it important that I know this? I probably should know this, but I know she has a mental health issue, and that's what we're working on, right?" And I wouldn't treat it any differently, no matter what it was to in the beginning to start off with. But it is important to understand that from a client of like, you know, because if you, for instance, if you drop the fat too low and you know you don't know that your client has a mental health issue, that could cause some problems. That can cause some damage. Um, I know that they coach that they want them to use their body fat and this, that, and the other, but if they're not used to using the ketones or their body producing them or know how to use them, um, it could cause trouble. It's caused trouble with people that have been on a carnivore diet long term, and wanted to lose weight. I kept in contact with somebody that was doing the protein sparing modified fasting, and they told me that their mental health was declining, but the results of the um, losing weight was more important to them.
Mm.
And you know that can be too, but you know, and they knew they were educated enough for themselves that they knew what was going on, right? um, but if you're coaching somebody and you have no idea.
Well, and that's where, as a coach, being able to have the healing tools and knowing the triggers, right? What is the trigger? What is the stress? But also having the tools, as well as being able to put some of those boundaries in place. Those are all, you know, kind of key components, or three legs of the stool, if you will, as far as, you know, what is the trigger. Maybe it's going to an event, maybe it's going, you know, wherever the case may be. Like you said, yours is stress, right? So going into work and dealing with this stress is a non-negotiable. You have to end up in work. Sure, you could probably find somewhere else to work, but that's not necessarily an option for a lot of people. And so being able to set that boundary on your mental well-being and be able to have that, but there again, people push boundaries. So how are you going to end up and cope, and what is those strategies when you are feeling overwhelmed that people can end up and take away from this?
um, well, breathing I found to be good. I have my touch points, my bilateral stimulation that I can use during the moment. I can use at night before I go to bed. I definitely still use, you know, the fat as bring down. I also use exogenous ketones when I know that I'm going through a period of stressful time, especially during my busy season. There's so many different tools out there that people can use. I know we have breathing. Uh, I want to call them workshops, but they're not workshops.
Meetings.
Meetings. We have breath work meetings, and I'm still in NA mood from my event this last weekend. Um, there's that. There's tapping. I've seen people use tapping, grounding. I also one of the things that I stress even to my treatment groups at this time is the circadian rhythm, which you talk about. It's very important, especially when you're working through addiction and mental health, that you have a schedule. A I'm going to sleep at this time. I'm going to wake up at this time. I'm going to get out and be in nature. I went fishing this weekend. I don't actually, I went and watched my boyfriend fish because I don't fish. It's not something, but I'll go and sit with him and I can take my shoes off and put them on the ground and get that sun and the air and even the smoky air. Um, but I was outside, and I think all those things that we do at the BNC correlate with helping with mental health and the addiction part, because frankly, you can ask a lot of people, if my food can be perfect, right?
Yes.
My food can be perfect, but if my sleep is trash, that food ain't doing nothing for me.
Nope.
That food is not, it may be there. It doesn't, like, I can't just use the food and nutrition to help my mental health and addiction. I need the other tools. I need the life skills. I also need my circadian rhythm to be somewhat. One of the things that I also stress is don't work night shifts, especially in early recovery. And if you do, if you don't have a choice, then you better have that circadian rhythm down to a T and getting what you need in there. I even, at work and stuff, I will get off here and it'll be time for me to get ready to go to bed, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have that challenge that we're doing where we're trying, and she said it was going to be hard, and I didn't believe her. I was like, no, it'll be easy. I can do that. I can
Yeah.
put my phone down an hour before bed, no problem. Well,
You're
for
right.
me to remember to do it,
Mhm. Oh yeah.
and different things, and getting that movement in too. Like, I think that's all important for it also. um there's just so many aspects, and I'm glad that we include them all in what we do. um because when I got clean, um they didn't teach me none of that stuff in treatment. They didn't tell me none of that stuff was important. I did the things that they taught me were some life skills, thinking for change, and we did Sabisa. I don't know, remember what it is, but it's just a type of treatment that they did. And then I did some aftercare for relapse prevention, right? But they didn't teach me that what I put into my body mattered. Maybe they didn't know, because you could have seen what they didn't by the way they fed us on Saturdays and Sundays, and they didn't teach me that, my circadian rhythm was important to get that light and to be grounded and, have those aspects of it. I'm glad to see that that's shifting. There are other people out there that are putting that into place with treating addiction and mental health. And I'm glad that even our local treatment centers here are looking at it and allowing that option to come in and be helpful with it. I'm hoping it prevents a lot of relapse. Like not every, and I tell them, I was like, not everybody's gonna pick it up, not everybody's gonna do it. But I did have one guy. He went to butter, beef, and eggs because it was simple for him. It was affordable for him, and as he was there, he was starting to get that clarity in his head of being able to fill out applications for his disability, and housing and all those other things that can be important. And then I seen him at a function on Memorial Day. I didn't recognize him because he looked a little bit younger. He had a lot of color and it had like some of that back in his face, and he looked stronger. He didn't look as old as he did as when I first met him even. So, yeah, it's not just a one and done.
And I think that's the biggest thing is there's no one size, right? But there's many avenues where you have to look. It's not just necessarily about food either. That's why, with the podcast that we're currently on, right? The healing the whole body, because you really have to end up and look at it as a whole, from the mindset to the gut to, the feet touching the earth, like you said, with grounding. And there's just so many things that we have to take into account, but it doesn't have to be hard. That challenge doesn't have to be hard. Just consistent, right? Mm-hmm. And working, I mean, we set it up for 90 days because it takes time to build that habit. So maybe, I know we talked in the community with a couple of the members, and there are parts that they weren't necessarily doing, and we modified it, right? Maybe it was the drinking of the water or the outside time, or, whatever the case may be. And I told them, I said, you're starting like you're starting on day one, right? Just because maybe on day 5 you don't have a perfect day, that's okay. You don't start over. It's not like some of those challenges where you have to start back at day 1. You give yourself grace, you continue with the grit, and you carry on. And that's what it's all about, was creating these habits and creating these structures and these healing tools and these steps so that people can end up and carry on. Because there's going to be time in your life or in your journey where maybe it's not working. Sherri and I have talked about this on other podcasts of even like my journey, right? You, Sly, are still pretty much carnivore. I know Sherri's added a few carbs back, and from time to time, I think maybe you have like your avocados and stuff. But for me, I had to pivot. I had to end up and adjust, right? I started carnivore, and sure, there were things that worked initially. And there were things that ended up and carried on, but it worked until it didn't. And I had someone on my Instagram when I put out our post for tonight's meeting that asked how much weight I had lost since adding carbs back in, because she knows that when I was carnivore, I did gain some of that weight back. I gained back about all but 20 pounds that I had lost. She forced me to end up and go back through and actually figure up the numbers, because going back to, how did I identify the true hunger? I tracked. Anyone that knows me over the years knows that I was very diligent with my tracking, and I tracked to the point where I knew my hunger cues, essentially, right? I knew when I was getting enough, but I also knew when I was getting too much. So, but yeah, as far as like the weight loss in the journey, it's okay if what you're doing now isn't working, and things like the challenge are out there, and they challenge you to look at it from a different side or a different perspective, or maybe you end up and you add some of these other things in. Maybe breath work isn't your thing. Maybe meditation or journaling or whatever, part of the challenge isn't your thing, but what if it is? What if you're not doing it right now, and that is the one point that can end up and change what your trajectory is, right? But yeah, once I personally added those carbs in, I've been able to lose again. And I've got that back down. Not necessarily, but there again, don't look at it like you said, you don't work on it as a weight loss aspect, right? Because there's a difference in me. So initially I had lost like 50 pounds. I gained all but 20 of it back. So there was those 30 pounds on there. But the difference was it was at like a 33% body fat percentage by the number on the scale versus now a 24% body fat and only having, like 15 pounds of that left to go. So body composition is a difference, and looking at it from that perspective too, of being able to mentally transition of what your focus is.
Yeah, and that's the other thing that I like is that, consistency. I heard it was said like Coach Amy from the Bite said she tells her people, 70%, at least try to get 70%, and you can see 100% of the results if you're doing it consistently enough. And I like that, because I think we've overdone it on that perfectionism. And when we, especially for recovering addicts, and I'm sure other people too, but that perfectionism, we put it there and it's just unreachable, unobtainable. And I like how, like, for me, yeah, I stayed carnivore, um, mainly because of the mental health aspect that I have to keep on. It's easier for me. It doesn't mean that I don't have a Brussels sprout every once in a while or an avocado, or I'm not a purist. I would probably get kicked out of some carnivore communities. But for me personally, like you said, a busy person and a lot of stress, I need to keep things as simple as I can for myself. And I never liked the veggies, never did. And I didn't have any other issues or things that were going on that I haven't been able to heal with it, or needed to take a look at and see if it would benefit me to add more carbs back in, or if I needed them. But I love that we aren't that dogmatic here, and we can be open minded enough to even look at that. And I know, um, you are on several different platforms and coaching and helping, so you've seen those variety of things. And I'm open minded enough to, you know know that if I have somebody, that there are other things out there available. Even Georgia Ede, when she teaches her classes, um, it's not just keto that she teaches. Is that what works and most healing for the brain? I'm absolutely going to say yes. If that's what we're after, that's where we need to go to, right? But she shows that anything from pre-agricultural paleo to the carnivore diet can work for the mental health aspect. And I keep saying mental health and addiction, but I think they're one and the same, but some people don't can make those connections all the time.
Yeah. Well, and there again, on the other aspects of food, kind of bringing back in the whole circadian side of things, or the dietary food groups or food camps, right? Keto, paleo, carnivore, any of those. in my opinion, eating more seasonally, right? That was one of the
Mhm.
other questions was what fruit are in season in the Midwest because we're, just now kind of starting to warm up. But there again, normally, and I say normally because Sherri's not where she's normally at, but the three of us are in the Midwest, but you're up, in North Dakota, me in Nebraska, and her down in Texas. And so it's not really a question that we got online that I can fully answer because the fruits are going to be so different for the Midwest. Like I can end up and answer, strawberries, raspberries, cherries, those type of things are going to end up and be in season for Nebraska. But if I go down to Texas, which is still considered Midwest, it's going to end up and be really different. Or if I come up to you, it's going to end up and be different.
But that tool you gave me, that website, they love that thing.
Yeah.
It's really fun. You don't have to guess. You can go to that website and they have it in there. You'll have to put that in the
Yeah. So
chat.
it's seasonalfoodguide.org, but I'll put it in the chat.
Yeah, it was, and that's a fun little way to go look, and you don't have to guess.
Because that's the biggest thing for a lot of people is I use that website because they don't know, right? We are used to being able to go to a grocery store and have full on access of anything that is there. But I just see someone's comment, why does it matter? So it matters what we're putting into our body because our body sees and feels a certain season of the year. When you look at it from a circadian quantum perspective, it sees and feels that time of year. But if you're eating a banana in the middle of wintertime and that's the signal light code from the food that we're getting in our gut, your body is going to end up dysregulated because it's not receiving the same thing from the nutrition that we're eating as what we are seeing and feeling. So that's why it matters. But yes, I will copy that and put it in the chat. So this is the resource that she was talking about.
And I take I take all your guys' stuff into the treatment center with me. I don't, the inpatient's a little bit quicker to go through than the outpatient, but that's what I love is being able to take all this information into there because I didn't have this information, right? When I got clean, I had to do a lot of researching, a lot of trial and error, a lot of spending a lot of money, and just doing that and getting educated enough. And now that I have all this and I know how much it's helped me and I get to see what the lifestyle changes does, right? What it really does as a whole. And I tell people all the time, I'm like, if you're not white knuckling through this right now, if you're just easy breezing through with this, maybe you don't need to make any changes. Maybe you're fine, right? But if you are white knuckling through it, try some of these things. 1% changes that challenge. Even if we're not doing everything, even if we are doing our main things and we just change one more thing on there instead of all the things are on there for the next couple of weeks and we start habit stacking, I know James Clear doesn't say that he coined habit stacking or even atomic habits, but he did write that book and it lays it out pretty clearly for us on how helpful it can be. And I do better with challenges and direction. I love them. They help me keep on something. Even doing the A1C reset, I may have never known how dangerous dairy is to me. Because I would have never stopped eating it. And now I know it's not good for me. So pushing ourselves to the next level or just trying something a little bit harder, I think also makes for a good, healthy way to work on ourselves consistently. Still waiting for those lunar bites, though.
Oh, she called you out in the
Yeah,
middle of our podcast.
I
Woo!
know. She likes to take that jab. No, I'm kidding.
It's my favorite. She does so good with them. She does. I mean, the fat fasting. I use those. I have those clips, and I still use those to the day. I will, as a tool, as a guide. I probably printed them out when I started the A1C, or when I was switching because the fasting was getting to be too much and I needed something different. I knew that I had this tool that Becky gave me over here, and it's appreciative of those kinds of things that we can have, right? And having a community that we can go share about them, even poke fun, you
Well,
know.
and that is the biggest thing, being able to have, because especially when you have it in a challenge or you have it in those masterclass formats, you're able to end up and revert back to it, right? It's not you don't feel like a fish out of water because you have the tools in your tool belt. And there's a time to end up and pull those, tools out of your arsenal. But there's also the time where don't be afraid to leave those in there and do a challenge like what we set up in the group too, because you never end up and know where that may end up and be the change that you need. And that's one of the biggest things that I tried to get, or have been trying to get through with even my Instagram, for those friends that are over there on Instagram watching, with this Better Than Yesterday challenge, is the momentum that it has, even for myself, sparked to move forward. I mean, I was on the phone the other day with Sherri because I was questioning the results that I was getting.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this can't be right. I'm like, and we went through, and yes, it was in reference to the scale. We changed the batteries on the scale. We ended up and got a different scale. We went through this whole process because I'm like, this can't be right. And I will tell you that it has been consistent. I don't
Yep.
suggest people, weigh themselves routinely like what I've been doing, but I'm like, this can't be right. But so yes, those tools, but also don't be afraid to step out of that comfort zone and out of some of those, masterclass tools to do some of these challenge. And the more consistent you are, the better the results.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because so before I came on my trip, poor Becky, I made her basically FaceTime me, and I was trying on clothes, like going, should I pack this? And wow, yeah, that was I still think I'm 300 pounds by the clothes I'm wearing. Like it is, yeah. And I mean, I've got some clothes here, but I would say what, 90% of them are too big.
Yeah, at least.
Yeah.
Let's put it this way: if she would have packed what she was going to pack, it would have looked a lot different than what she probably packed. So
Well,
Yeah.
we've been doing this for a long time, Becky. And I like them because we can put them on our memories. So this was my memory from 2021, which looks a little similar, but a little bit different also, right? So we added or made more detail into this challenge that we got going on. But like, I, I, I think it's good. I think, that what's one of the things that they do say is the um, opposite of addiction is connection, right? So there's another tool for the mental health and addiction, is that, the connection that we get. And um I know some people are like, yeah, but you are on the computer, right? We're on the computer. um I can say that I have just the strongest connection with you ladies as I do with the people that I go to meetings with here in person. You know, not if maybe even more so with you guys now than most of the people that are out there, just because we've been through so much together, and um it is still personal. You guys are the ones that taught me that I could have the sponsor that I wanted and needed, you know, because she moved away. So I do, it's just another level. So this is, and another, you know, layer to the uh, bigger picture.
Well, and that's just it. The connection in the community that we have built within the BNC community. You know, I've seen several of you for we're going on 5, 6 years. And at that point where, just like, you know, Sherri was saying, she met up with a community member for lunch, that communication or that connection, even though it's virtual, once that gets put in person,
Mhm.
that connection is almost more. I mean, we went to Hack Your Health and we had a BNC meetup a year ago, literally a year ago, because I flew back on my anniversary last year.
That's right. Yeah.
She's a
So,
hopeless romantic.
right, that's what happens after so many years. It's just another day. No, I'm kidding. I love my husband dearly. And, but I did. And when we ended up getting together for that BNC meetup,
Yeah.
the the conversations, it was like we picked up right where we left off. You know, um, we had a community member fly in, and it was so sweet. She stayed with me. Um, Being able to give her that hug, being able to sit
Yeah.
down and, you know, eat a steak. I mean, we grilled that night for the meetup, and so no, we didn't get the full community together, but yeah, the the connection picks up. So don't discount the connection that can be built online, because once you end up and you actually get to those meetups, it's even intensified.
Yeah, the community member that I met today for lunch, um, I had no clue how tall he was in person, and I'm like, "Oh, holy cow." And that was, like, one of the first things I text Becky. I was like, "He's he's tall." Like, "Oh my goodness." It was so funny. And but yeah, the connection that we had was like you said, we just picked up from the meetings that we have, and we just, we we had our own little B&C meeting at the restaurant today, you know? It was but it was neat, and we've decided that when I come into town, to visit my parents, that we're gonna get together again. So, um, yeah, it was crazy that we could hug each other, and I don't know if Becky realized how freaking short I am until she met me in person.
She is short, but Sly, you're even shorter. So
I was gonna say, I'm only this big with really long arms and fingers.
Oh my gosh, Becky would be like, "Give me that phone, I'll take the selfie," you know, 'cause
I'm honestly surprised you didn't have him take the selfie, but
but it was fun. Yeah, it community is so huge. All right. Like, and now that I live in the middle of Podunk nowhere, Texas, um, the community is even more important. Um, because I do live in the middle of nowhere. And I love that. And I love you girls. I very much value I value each of you as a coach, and I value each of you as a friend. I mean, we even have a little private chat that we chat with amongst us, right? And so and sometimes we get on our meetings and it's just the three of us. And you know, it's a whole nother level of fun that we have, and But you know what? That's what I think you nailed it when you said we're not dogmatic about anything.
Yeah.
Well, and that's where being able to have a community and be kind, right? Be kind to each other, be loving to each other, knowing that, we don't have to guilt or bully someone into eating a certain way or anything along those lines, right? And we can still find that common ground to have such connections and relations that we can have our differences, and it's okay to be different. It's okay to be, do things a little bit different than the next person. And that's the biggest thing, is it's okay. You
It
don't
is.
have to, do it one strict way.
Well, I will have to tell you, this was fun. And we came up with this roundtable idea in one of our BNC meetings. It was just the three of us. And so that's how this was born. But I kind of have a feeling, Becky, we need to have Coach Sly on with us more often because this has been fun.
Yes,
Yes,
it's
it
always.
has been.
And it's nice to get another perspective, right, in the mix of things because you're coming from a different walk of life than what I am and than what Becky is. And so I think it just hits a wider audience and I just absolutely love it. And of course I adore you. So
Back at you, dollface.
Awesome, ladies. Well, if there's, for those of you that are watching on Twitch, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, if there's something you would like us to discuss on a roundtable, we will put out, posts before time. You can submit questions. You can also comment below this and let us know what you would like us to talk about, or anyone you would like us to interview.
speaking of, we have is it next week that we have a
Mm-hmm.
guest?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's a repeat guest actually. So it's April. April's a type 1 diabetic. And we when did we talk to her? Has it been a little over a year, right?
Yeah, I was going to say just a little over a year. I want to say it was a year ago in maybe May, March, May.
Yeah, something like that. And I'm excited for April to come on. April is a BNC community member. But April, being a type 1 diabetic and her walk in her healing journey from when we talked to her a little over a year ago is remarkable. And she's doing the challenge with us as well. And so hopefully you guys will tune in for that. We definitely ask for you to like, subscribe, make comments, share our podcast, go back and watch some old ones that you've missed. We definitely appreciate it. And Sly, thank you again so much for coming on. We definitely appreciate it. And I think we're going to have to do this again like fairly soon.
Woohoo!
We'll make it a routine thing.
Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna go to our community and go to our meeting right now. So
Awesome. I know. Yep. I'm headed there as well. Everyone have a wonderful